Welcome back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Ewell, and today we're going to be talking about the habit of self-care. I have a very special guest, Brad Blazar, who is an author, speaker, and coach. He has also written the books On the Wings of Eagles and is currently in the process of writing another book called Blueprint for Your Better Self. So I'm excited you're on the show today, man. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So how did you actually get started in doing what you're doing now? And was it a transition,
It was a little bit of a transition for me. If you had told me a year and a half ago I'd be an author, where my book was recently picked up as the #1 read for young entrepreneurs over in the UK, and I was getting on stages talking to 100 people and coaching, I would have laughed and said, "You're absolutely crazy." But I guess when you look at my hard skill set of what I've been doing most of my career, I've been the national sales manager for a number of firms. And of course, as a national sales manager, you're constantly coaching and training people. So it was part of what I call my hard skill set. But I've always been interested in self-development and human performance. I was a business owner in my 20s where I kind of quit school and started a small oil company and built that up to a multi-million-dollar platform. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, had to dissolve the company due to the uncertainty in the tax laws and the pricing of oil. Went back to school, came out, and over my career, I've raised north of $2 billion for others, and have really just studied with what I call the greats of the great. The Tony Robbins, the Zig Ziglars, the Stephen Coveys, and the Deepak Chopras, and soaking up everything. And launched the book earlier this year. And like you said, I'm off to a second one, the Blueprint for Your Better Self.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I launched my first book in December, and then called Man in the Mirror. And then I'm actually in the process of editing my final copy of my new one, Habit-Based Lifestyle. So similar. I had no idea you just did this in the last year.
Yeah.
What were you doing, prior to this, say 2-3 years ago?
The last probably 20 years really has been spent in the financial services field, working as what they call a wholesaler, representing various investment sponsors and issuers, kind of as an intermediary between them and financial advisors and planners. Basically going out almost like a pharmaceutical rep, where they're meeting with physicians in the hope that they'll prescribe the medicines. What I was doing is representing mutual funds and real estate funds in the hope that these registered reps and planners would use those products when they were allocating their clients' portfolios. And was always, doing well, made a great living. Always one of the top 2 to 3% in the industry due to my habits and just my drive and determination and the goals that I put on paper. And really, always had this dream in the back of my mind of I want to be on stage someday. I want to be the next Zig Ziglar and Anthony Robbins, really inspiring and motivating people. And I think that everybody has a message and a story inside them. I think the problem with a lot of people is they don't realize that they have something in them that can help somebody else. And the challenge for so many people is really how to figure out what that is. But I think you get to a point in life where you have that desire to give back and help transform the lives of other people. I mean, it's like Jack Welch says in his great book. I'm a big fan of Jack Welch. He says there are millions and millions of people around the world raising their hands looking for help. They just don't know where to get it. And if all you can be is a beacon of light for them that they can reach out to and learn from, what a wonderful thing. Tim Story says it's what he calls the magical component of your life. It's the magic you're able to create in the exchange of energy between other people.
Yeah, I think of how powerful that is because, I spent 20 years of my life as a personal trainer. And one of the things that I realized just the last 4 years was like, man, do I really want to spend the rest of my life helping people with nutrition and fitness when there's so much more to life than just that?
Sure.
And, one of the cool things that I'm kind of hearing you say is, if we can help one person, and if we change our world, we can change their world, just by simply being an example and being a light to them. And I think that's really powerful and really cool. So what do you think about, do you think that people know their kind of unique gift and their unique ability, but they're just afraid to kind of step out and step into that? Or do you think that they really have no idea?
I think there's really two groups. I think there's a large group that really has no idea. They haven't really figured it out yet for themselves. And I think the other group is kind of what I classify as the dreamers. I believe very strongly that there's three types of people, and you're either a blamer, where you're blaming your lack of success on other people, right? You're saying, oh, my boss didn't promote me, or my boss doesn't give me the tools I need to be successful, therefore I'm not, now I'm going to look for another job. They're always blaming others. Then there are the dreamers, and this is the difference, as Mark Cuban says, between the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs. They always have ideas and they're dreaming, but they never commit to take action. They never develop those habits that you're talking about in that habit-based lifestyle that you preach. And then there are the game changers. And the game changers are going to figure it out. They're going to do whatever it takes, right, to go out there and give of themselves and find people that can mentor them and that can take them to a higher plane. And so when I'm talking to potential coaching clients, I say, you got to figure out which bucket you're in. I'm selling vitamins and I'm selling painkillers. If you're a dreamer or you're a blamer, here's a bunch of painkillers. Go have your pity party. But if you have the desire and you want to be a game changer, we can coach you to a higher plane of success. Over here are the vitamins. And there you go.
Yeah, and I kind of think of a blamer as someone whose life happens to them.
Yep.
Maybe a dreamer is they want life to happen through them. They just haven't taken that initial step. And then a game changer is like someone who's actually creating their own life and creating their own reality. Yeah. Which is, it's great, man. I love this. So, what is, like, now that you've kind of stepped into this, is this your first experience as an entrepreneur, or is this really just your first experience as you just kind of being a coach, promoting yourself and leveraging yourself, or have you always done this?
No, I'd say this is kind of a new endeavor. It's so funny. I was actually chuckling the other day. I was on stage in front of about 100 people speaking to the University of Texas Dell Medical Center. And I said, when I came out with my book, I naturally thought the first group of people that would run out and get it, right, would be my mom and my aunts and uncles and my siblings and my cousins. And that was not the first group. It was everybody else that I was marketing to on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. And I think the reason for that, to a large extent, is they've always known me as somebody else. They've never known Brad Blazar as now the published author or as the guy getting up on stages, right, speaking to large groups. And so they kind of rolled their eyes and said, oh, okay, But now that it's happening, and now that they actually see it happening, they're like, wow, we got to get the book and find out what this is all about. What's this art of beliefology? You're creating this following around the world that people want to learn about. And so it's really kind of become really cool that a lot of the people that, I won't say they were trying to tear me down, but they were rolling their eyes and they were the naysayers, and they were like, well, let's give it 3 months. And if he goes back to his former career, we'll forgive him type thing. But I think it gets back to what you and I both understand, Jesse, and that is, if you have goals and you clearly write them down on paper, and then you start taking action and start moving forward on implementation, those things happen because you see them in your mind, you have the belief, and you have the conviction. And I believe very first that what happens in your life is you have this desire, you have the conviction, and then there's kind of like a revelation, right?
Sure.
Once you have that, you're able to move forward and start putting those habits in motion. And over time, by doing them repeatedly, it creates a new lifestyle. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was a triathlete years ago, and, every morning I wake up and I'd go run 10, 12 miles. And then late in the day, I'd go do a 30, 40, 50 mile bike ride. But that's what you have to do, right? If you're going to basically be going out and doing these long endurance triathlons. And people said, well, my God, how do you do these half Ironmans, or how do you go run a marathon? And I said, it's a lifestyle. It's nutrition. It's doing it daily. It's creating the habits. You just don't wake up and say, I'm going to go run 13 miles. But I was at a point in my level of fitness where pretty much any day of the week, I can hop out of bed and go run a half marathon for you and just think nothing of it. It was like David Goggins, right?
Right.
But it's those habits that you create over and over again to move yourself to that higher plane of success, where most people are just unwilling to do that. I believe that around the world, we have this huge problem. And that is, people are living in a life of okay, right? When you go up to somebody, you say, hey man, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. The response you usually get 9 out of 10 times is, I'm doing okay.
Right.
Well, on my scorecard in life, okay is about a 5 or a 6. I want to hear someone say, man, I'm doing fantastic. Any better and I'd explode. And I think the reason we don't hear that from more people is that they're just like a cork in an ocean. They don't have any goals. They're just floating around. They work for somebody else, and so they feel caged, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. And they have what I call the Friday afternoon syndrome and the Sunday night syndrome, which is, man, I'm looking forward to the weekend for my 2-day vacation, right? Where I don't have to go to work. You should be inspired to go to work.
Right.
If you don't love what you do, and if there is no passion in what you do, why don't you go find something else to do that you're passionate about?
Right.
Well,
and I think, let's back up a little bit, because there's a couple of things I want to ask you about with this. So one is this term that you've trademarked called beliefology. What exactly is that? And, what made you come up with this?
The book On the Wings of Eagles is really a compilation of the messages that I've heard from many of the best thought leaders that I've had the pleasure of interacting with over the last maybe 7-8 years now. People like former President George W. Bush, Kevin O'Leary, who I've met multiple times, Joe Namath, Fran Tarkenton down in his offices in Atlanta with his son, Matt. I was a classmate of gold medalist Olympic diver Greg Louganis at the University of Miami, and got interested in NLP and neuro-linguistic programming when I would see him on the 10-meter platform visualize the dive in his mind before he leaped off. And so I was sitting in my office one day looking at this stack of notes saying, wow, I bet you there are millions of people that would love to meet just half of that list. I've already done that. And so that's kind of how I came up with the concept of On the Wings of Eagles. The Eagles are all of these great thought leaders, right? The Joe Namaths, the Kevin O'Learys, the Magic Johnsons that Brad Blazar's already met or interacted with or heard from. And so it's really the concept of the art of beliefology is, if you change your beliefs, you can change your future. The problem is most people don't understand how to do that.
Right.
And so my philosophy is, look, your life today does not have to be your life tomorrow. You can change. And so really what the second book does, and it's called The Blueprint, of course, for Your Better Self, is it outlines the process of bringing about that change, so that if you buy into the concept that I discuss in the first book, which is the art of beliefology, let's change your beliefs to create a better future, the second book will actually show you the steps to do that. How to put that in motion, how to create the habits, and how to move forward.
So the second book sounds like a tactical approach to like changing your life or your lifestyle.
Correct. It's really what I call the secret sauce, the recipe. It's the how to do this, where the first book is really the concept, to plant the seed that, man, if you're living a life where you're not excited and you're not pumped up and you're not charged, you got to understand, you can change your beliefs to create a better tomorrow.
Right. So what do you think?
Really the framework of how to do that.
What do you think holds people back the most from changing their beliefs?
It all comes down to, I think, everything that we've all read about. It's limiting beliefs and it's self-doubt. It's fear. It's self-doubt. I'm not worthy enough, or I don't have the skills, or I'm scared. And I find that a lot, of course, in my students. It's, the limiting beliefs and the self-doubt that you carry in your subconscious as excess baggage really fosters itself in your childhood between your formative years of 7 to 12. It's that you don't want to do that. You can't do that. Your parents telling you this, and it's really there to protect you. And a lot of that stuff that's in your subconscious is really there to protect you. And so it creates this hesitancy to move forward and take action. That's, of course, where the call reluctance comes from for a lot of the people in sales, right? They have this fear of rejection.
Right.
You have to understand that prey drive and how to trigger that prey drive. And so I tell people that, you have to understand first that those beliefs may or may not be true, and then challenge those beliefs and move them aside and replace them with something that's positive as a new belief system, and then start taking baby steps, which are the habits, because beliefs don't just pop into your mind overnight. They're reinforced through action. And so if you start creating those habits, those will reinforce the new beliefs. And now the new beliefs, of course, will foster a new lifestyle over a period of time by continuing to adopt those habits, because as you're adopting those habits, the brain is subconsciously saying, this is my new belief. I'm capable of doing this. I can do it. When I coach people that want to start businesses, they're scared. And I said, you think a 23-year-old kid that dropped out of school knew how to run a multi-million-dollar oil company the day I decided to put the name of the company on the door? All I thought is you need some business cards and letterhead, and there you go. But I figured it out along the way by getting people that mentored me and that pulled me forward to that higher plane. I got an accountant, I got an attorney, I got a geologist that found me the deals, and here I was running a multi-million-dollar platform as a 24, 25-year-old kid, walking into my accountant's office, and he's looking at me like, here's a 25-year-old kid that's driving up in a brand new Porsche, raising millions of dollars from accredited investors across the country. Most people look at that and say, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, I just figured it out. Yeah. Anybody that starts a business figures it out, but you've got to have the desire. And more importantly, like I coach, is you got to take action, man. Goals without action are nothing but dreams.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that when I work with people, one of the common things that I see is, we talk a lot about limiting beliefs, but limiting beliefs are actually in our head. And I actually believe they're stuck energy in our body, because everybody talks about a feeling, which feelings come from our body, not from our head. And so a lot of times we'll talk about, like, I don't feel good enough. I feel scared. I feel fear. But all those things are stuck in our bodies, in and around our bodies. And one of the things that I really like is to be able to tap into, okay, well, where is this feeling coming from?
Right.
And really tracing it back to, like you said, their childhood, and really finding, like, hey, when was the first time you experienced this feeling? And they can go back to it. And then at that place, kind of reprogram that belief. And then it's like, well, I get you don't feel good enough, but what would it feel like for you to actually feel good enough? And when they can begin to associate, well, I've never actually considered what it would feel like to be good enough. Then it's like, okay, now I start realizing that, oh shit, I can actually create my own good enough.
Yep.
And then once I do that, I now have something to work towards.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. Is you have to go back in your mind and kind of look back to find out, like you just said, where did that belief first foster itself? Why do I carry this baggage with me? Because as Tony Robbins says, you can associate pain or pleasure to those beliefs, right? I mean, a lot of people don't go and work out every day like you and I both do, because they associate discomfort. Oh, I'm going to sweat, or I'm going to be uncomfortable the next day when I wake up, and my body's going to be sore. And
right.
So if you associate the positive aspect of those things, obviously, which is, I'm going to look better in my clothes, I'm going to have more energy, I'm going to reduce my risk for disease, I'm going to have less inflammation, all of those positive attributes, you create that leverage. And obviously, if you can move over here and have more pleasure associated with those things, that's what's going to guide you forward. But I totally believe exactly what you've said. It's going back and challenging that and replacing that old belief that you can't do something or it's holding you back with a positive belief that you can, and then just crashing through that and moving forward.
Sure. So a couple things that kind of, you lightly mentioned, but like I really want to tap into this because this is where I believe most people are stuck is they stopped having a vision, but like even a vision, I think of like imagination. Like we stop as adults imagining ourselves, being this future self as if it is today. Can you touch on that a little bit from like your perspective, like where you work with clients and it's like, man, like these guys just don't have a vision for where they want to be. They're kind of stuck in their imagination, and what they envision is exactly who they are.
I think a lot of it, and this actually comes back to a study that I write about in my book, and I actually have developed a goal planning guide to help guide people to the process of committing to goals. There was a study done by Harvard years ago where they looked at a group of a few hundred people, and they tracked this group of a few hundred people over about 5 years. And what they found is that there were only 3% of this group of a few hundred people, just 3%, that physically took the time to commit their goals to paper. And then they went back regularly, once a month or once a quarter to look at those goals and to track their success and their progress. There was another roughly 14% that had goals. They just hadn't put them down on paper. And then, of course, the rest was the other, roughly 83%. And when they finished this study, they looked at the 3% that had taken the time to commit their goals in writing. And what they found out was that 3% out-earned the other two groups 10x. Not 3 times, not even 5 times, but they out-earned the other group 10 times.
Wow.
So when I sit down and I talk to people, throughout that coaching process, is I say, what do you want to do with your life? I mean, what are your goals? What are your dreams? And they, tell you up here. And I said, are they written down? Do you have them written somewhere where you can pull them out and review them on a regular basis and maybe make changes or see where you are in the progress? And if they say no, I pull out my folder and there you go, buddy. I mean, I've got this right in my office, as you can see, and I'm very visual. I'll go through the yachting magazines. There's my new yacht right there, buddy. I'm going to have that someday. There's my new sports car. I'm going to have that. And of course, I've already had multiple sports cars. And so I tell people, you want to focus on no more than 5 to 7 goals at any time. You really can't commit yourself to a long laundry list. And I believe very strongly that goals have to have a number of things. Number one is they have to be specific. Number two is they have to be measurable. Number three is they have to be actionable. Number four is they need to be somewhat realistic. It's good to stretch yourself a little bit and push yourself, but they need to be realistic in terms of attaining it. And then last is they need to be time bound. Saying, hey, I want to do this by the end of the year, or I want to do this within the next 3 years. And I call that the SMART acronym.
Sure.
So we've actually developed a goal planning guide that we make available for free by just simply coming to our website or going to my URL landing page and registering. That's our free gift to everybody as part of that coaching process to really get clarity on those goals first, because you really don't have any direction, you don't have any purpose, and you don't have any vision without those goals.
Right. Yeah, give me 1 sec.
Sure, go right ahead, you bet.
Yeah, so as I kind of think of this is, the SMART acronym's been around for so long, but I still think people are way too general when it comes to specific and measurable. And I see a lot of people set their how as their outcome rather than actually set their goal. And so when they hit this, they end up not really being fulfilled. And then you also have some of these other goals that are like performance-based versus like mastery, which is another place where I see people make big mistakes is It's more about a performance of win at all costs to get to where I want to be versus, I think of mastery as kind of like a black belt. You start as a white belt and you work your way up to a black belt. And they often say the only difference between a white belt and a black belt is, the consistency that the black belt has 10 years of being consistent at the same moves as the white belt.
Yep. I would agree 100%. You bet. Yep.
So tell me a little bit about, kind of what you're doing now as far as coaching, who you coach, who are the clients you work with, and what are you guys like doing?
Really, the people I'm working with are really more the people that are following me in social media to a large extent, are people that really have a desire to just see themselves more successful in whatever career path or line of work they happen to be in. Certainly real estate, people in financial services, people in sales, I think always have a desire to improve. How can I earn more money? Commission salesperson. So if I can get in front of more leads, or if I can generate better follow-up, I can see significant increase in my success. And so having been the national sales manager and over the course of my career, closing some of the largest transactions for multiple companies, where I closed the largest sale in the company's history, where the commission alone on an $11 million or a $9 million transaction is more money than many people make working all year. I've developed this other program that complements the Build-A-Beast, and we call that the Mega Producer Coaching Program. It's teaching people in sales how to have the proper mindset and how to speak to people as equals so that you can close these multi-million-dollar transactions. And so a lot of CEOs, a lot of people obviously that run sales teams will have me come in as part of that coaching process to say, look, it's better to go out fishing for blue marlins than bluegills, but you still need a lot of bluegills, right? It's the difference between hitting singles and doubles and being able to go up and hit a home run every now and then. Once
Right.
you find those whales, though, you need to know how to reel them in. Then the other, of course, is what we call that $1 million follow-up. I learned this from Coach Michael Burke. Studies have shown that it typically takes 7 to 10 touches with somebody to convert them from a prospect to a customer or client.
Yeah.
The problem, of course, is most people give up after the third or fourth touch.
Yeah.
This guy's never gonna become a client. And so it's, again, that call reluctance. It's that lack of prey drive. It's the lack of that warrior mentality that you've got. Think about the difference in your business if you understood this and made the 5th or the 6th or the 7th sales call. Because many cases that person just hasn't seen enough of you. They don't know you well enough. And so one of the things that we develop with people is how to create what I call an aura around you, where you become a person of interest, using an explanation of your services and the natural law of attraction, so that people are drawn to you and follow up with you rather than you having to be in your office making those cold calls every day, right? It's always better to be answering the phone where you're in receivership of inbound calls where people are seeking out your services, want to know more about what you do. And so we train people on how to develop that using the law of attraction, knowing that like attracts like.
Right.
And if I'm doing business with you, Jesse, and you refer me to somebody that's a friend, 9 out of 10 times I'm going to enjoy doing business with them because I perceive they're just like you. And
Sure.
I believe very strongly that business is nothing more than the positive exchange of energy between two people. It's how do you develop that, and then how do you create networks so that you can scale and grow your business to take you to higher levels of success. The challenge with most people, unfortunately, is they're scared. It comes back to rejection, and I understand that, but you have to understand how to work through that as a sales manager. And so coaching sales trainers and managers on how to push those buttons and develop that prey drive in people that report to them, that's part of the coaching process with a lot of the students that are following us.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that you said is it takes 7 to 10 times, but now with social media, they're actually saying it takes 15 to 20 times, so it's almost doubled. And I actually heard this at a Business Mastery about a month and a half ago, where one of the guys, I think it was Ryan Dice, said he's like, hey man, it used to be 7 to 10, now it's actually 15 to 20. The difference now is, you don't necessarily have to cold call people. You could send them your podcast, you could send them an email, you can follow up in so many other ways now, but we've also almost lost that personal connection of, picking up the phone when the phone was really the only thing we had. Now you can text, you can send a video, you can do all these other ways, but it does take more touch points now today than it ever has.
You're absolutely right. Obviously having been around a lot of professional athletes where I've met Joe Namath, Fran Tarkenton, Irving Magic Johnson, people that are at that level that get paid, $20 million, $40 million to play in the NFL or the NBA, they show up motivated. They don't need a dose of motivation. They're getting paid those millions to show up daily motivated. What they're getting, of course, is coaching at what they do. Obviously, a defensive tackle, they have a defensive line coach, they have coaches for the quarterback, but they show up motivated. Most people don't have that internal motivation. And so part of the coaching process is every Tuesday and Thursday is pushing out through social media or through text to the group is what I call these little daily doses that we call weekly beats. They're like a rhythm. Your life, I believe, runs in a rhythm. You've heard of biorhythms.
Yeah.
And so it's much like your heartbeat. It's much like the brain waves. You have to have that daily dose of what I call external motivation so that in the morning you're getting a text or you go to our Facebook group and there's a short little video that just touches upon something, right? It's just reminding them of those habits or to do this or to reach out to the people that are in their feeder system. And then, once a week, we have basically what I call the accountability where we do the podcast training where people that are our students will dial in for a specific dose of training on one of the subjects that are tied to those 7 demonstrated capacities, whether we're coaching that month maybe on, your physical, or we're coaching on getting into the right mindset, or maybe we're coaching a little bit more on the spiritual side or how to develop relationships, to develop that societal side of your dimension. Because all of those things are very important. We've all heard that, money doesn't buy happiness. Certainly it's a lot better to have money than not. But I want to coach people so that they have a balanced life and so that they feel healthy about themselves and are really having success in multiple areas of their life. It's sad to be physically fit and jacked and have a crappy marriage.
Right.
So I want my coaching students to really have that balance and understand that you need to focus on these 4 dimensions. And as, Jerry Maguire, of course, when Raj was looking for what he wanted, just, man, I want the quan, man, right? I want that quan. I want that special life that very few people ever aspire to.
Right. So let's kind of shift this into, the habit of self-care. What are some things that you do on a daily basis for self-care?
I try to work out every day. I'm a big believer in planning time for my own personal self-development. And I know years ago, I did not do that. I would have the intention, right, to go to the gym. And then 9 o'clock would roll around and I'd say, well, it's too late to go to the gym. And so my fitness was obviously jeopardized. And so what I did is as part of my daily habits, first appointment of the day after I get out of bed, 5:30 to 7, I'm at the fitness center, pushing the weights, getting on the treadmill, doing whatever. It's basically an appointment with myself as a habit. And now, if I go a day or two without working out, I really feel it. I don't have the same energy. I can definitely feel it. So that's one habit, is just going every day and working on my personal fitness. The other is blocking out time during my day as a habit to do the high value things that I need to get done, like reaching out to my prospects, those people that have expressed interest, that want to know more. Hey, come to one of my free events, or hey, attend next week's podcast. I'm going to be talking about how to develop yourself as a person of interest, and start working that, so that when I get to the end of the day at 6 o'clock, I don't look back and say, wow, I forgot to follow up on those 20 people. Because if I don't do that on a regular daily basis and 3 days or 4 days go by, I know the interest they've expressed will wane. Their lack of desire to work with me will obviously fall off the cliff, and I won't be able to capture them perhaps as a student or as a coaching client. So it's really developing those habits of, success. And the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is really not as great as you would think. It's
Right.
really a very small difference. And it was so funny. I was actually talking to another coach, and he said, I know that on my worst day, when I roll out of bed and I feel like crap, I'm going to have a better day than most people that are not successful, because of the small habits I've instilled, which is to work out, to reach out, to follow up, to
Right.
make the calls. So even on my worst day where I feel like I'm terrible, I'm still better than the other 90%, because they don't have those habits that they're doing that have gotten them to the level of success that I'm now at.
Sure. Yeah. And if I go back to, the white belt, it's like, hey, you worked out for, the last 10 years consistently. Well, that makes that much of a difference, maybe per day, but over the course of 10 years, we're talking about something that made that much different, that's now this much different. And so I really look at that as a gap that you've created between, hey, where I am today and where I want to go. But we don't get here by taking one giant step. We get there by taking one step every single day consistently. Yep. And I think where people make the mistake is they choose intensity over consistency. And so they want to take that big leap because they're like, well, it's not that far up. Let me just see how far I can take this leap. They get a quarter of the way and it's almost like they miss, and they have to start all the way back over and go back to the beginning.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely right. Yep.
So, you teach, one of the main habits you teach is obviously working out. And we know a lot of the benefits to this, from, just, feeling powerful and feeling on fire to when we're done, but also the health benefits, mindset benefits. But then you talk about this follow-up system, and, like you said, most people are afraid to get turned down. And so rather than get turned down, they just don't make the call. But in fact, they're actually turning themselves down, while they're not making the call, because that's all they're thinking about is, man, I didn't make this call today, so I don't have this opportunity. And then they kind of start going into self-sabotage. Is there any other habit or any other, mindset tricks that you have for this when somebody gets stuck there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, some of the other, what I would call tricks, or some of the other habits are really focused on some of those other areas. I think so many people in the world today really are detached from those that they love, that they're close to. I mean, I hate to see this as a father, but, you go to a restaurant and there's the dad on his, cell phone texting, right? And then, his daughter's on the other side of the table with her iPad. And I think that we as humans, to a degree, have really lost that connection. I almost say kids today are being raised by iPads instead of parents.
Yeah.
And so I think that, one of the habits that we've instilled in our home here is that, come 5:30, 6 o'clock, cell phones disappear. You're not running to check your text. You're not running to check your email. There's really that quality family time to really develop the relationships with those that are close to you. So I think that's just become a habit in my household that has really, I think, strengthened the bond of me being a father to my daughter, and of course me being a husband to my wife, so that we can do what I call quality time, whether it's getting out a board game or going out and doing something as a family. Because I think so many people will have the dinner, and then dad all of a sudden now is running to the emails, or he's over there texting, his business partners or colleagues. And, the daughter wants his attention. And so that's just another, quote, habit.
Yeah, so let's stop right there because I think this is a huge thing. I mean, it's kind of funny for you to say kids are being raised by iPads instead of parents. And in some ways, there's a huge benefit to this because kids could find out, how to do anything productive or unproductive on their phone or iPad. But so what you're telling me is, every night at a certain time, you're putting up your phone. You're kind of like, hey, there's no, blue screen. There's no TV. There's no iPads. There's no phones for a certain amount of time, which I think is super powerful because there's a lot of evidence that not only blue screens affect sleep,
Yep.
they also affect, our mind where we're constantly having to check something. It becomes a habit. And then also Wi-Fi is a huge thing that actually affects our sleep also. So
Yep.
I want to stress to people that this is super important and not to take this lightly. And I think it's super powerful that you're doing that.
No, I mean, absolutely. It wasn't for those reasons, but those certainly are very valid reasons from the health perspective. But it was really just to develop, again, that other dimension, which is one of those four things that I focus on, which is really the societal. That's the relationship you have with other people, whether they're friends, business colleagues, and, who's more important than your immediate family, right?
Right.
It's one thing to have all of this great success, but if you don't have love and you don't have magic around you to share in that, all the success in the world is really of no value.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
it's those things, and then of course the other thing, which has really become a habit of mine, is really to kind of give back now. When I was running marathons and into triathlons, people always used to just ask me because they thought I was like, Superman. Well, geez, how do you go out and do what you do? Again, it's all habit, but at the same time, for me, I lost my dad due to cancer about 20 years ago. And so when I was running and getting into marathons, which were really the first element of the triathlon, then I became a cyclist, then finally I became a swimmer, is I said, it's kind of cool if I can get people to pledge me for every mile I run, I can raise money for cancer research. And so I created a website, and of course I would put this out on my blog, hey, I'm running a marathon next month. Please come to my website and sponsor me $2, $3 a mile. And of course, I raised thousands of dollars for cancer research. And it was really interesting to hear that other endurance athletes do something very similar. I had the pleasure of introducing and interviewing Darren Miller on my podcast. Darren is the only person on the planet Earth that has completed what they call the Ocean 7, which are the 7 longest channel swims around the globe, where he's completed each swim on the first attempt. There's only 18 people that have ever done this, but some of the people, of course, had to go back, make the same swim 2 or 3 times. And so I said to Darren, you're doing 20-mile open water swims, and the only thing you get to wear is just a bathing suit, goggles, and a swim cap. They don't even give you a wetsuit, and you're out in water 62, 65 degrees. That's cold water, right? I said, how do you stay in the water for 18 to 20 hours? He said, every time I turned to take a breath, I saw that third boat with all of the people I'd lost to cancer cheering me on. You can do this. You can go the extra mile, because it was a fundraiser. It's how I brought awareness to the things that I cared about.
Wow. That's amazing.
Amazing guy.
Yeah, I think what it is like somebody has a powerful why that's beyond themselves, and they have a vision of, where they have a vision of their why and where they're going. And I think that kind of backs up everything that you've said on the podcast today is you have to have a vision, or you have to imagine yourself as something greater than you are today in order to have that driver going forward. And once your why is kind of lined up with that, that's where the real power and where the real magic happens.
You're absolutely right. It kind of gets back to what I had said earlier in the podcast, and that was when I came out with the book, I thought naturally the first group of people that would run out, right, would be my family. But it wasn't that group, because they've always seen me differently. They were kind of like, well, is this really going to work for him? Is his book going to do well? And is he going to be invited to speak? And of course, now that that's all in motion, and my book's been rated as one of the top reads for entrepreneurs, I'm getting invited to speak on stages. I'll be in Boston in October at the High Performance Success Summit with 5 other coaches speaking there. It's all taken off. And so the funny thing is, a couple months ago, my wife, my own wife even asked me, how much longer are you going to pursue this midlife crisis where, you're sinking money into this and you're paying for airfare? And I'm like, I'm never going to stop this. This is my goal. This is now my mission and my vision and my purpose in life. I'm never going to stop pursuing this because this is who I want to become.
Right.
This is who I will become. And by setting that ball in motion, Jesse, and now having those habits, it's now slowly becoming a reality. And now I'm getting on to much larger podcasts. Now I'm getting on to bigger stages. And the thing I tell people is it can happen to any one of you. Anyone.
Right.
It's
that's awesome.
You've got to have those habits and you've got to have those goals and you've got to set it in motion. And once it's set in motion, it just takes off. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for being on here. There were so many powerful takeaways, and I look forward to reading your book when it comes out.
Absolutely. I'll send you the first one. We'll correspond via text or email, and you'll get a courtesy signed copy. And then, of course, we'll send you the Build a Beast swag as well. And, if people want to check me out, they can go to the website. It's just www.bradblazar, B-L-A-Z like zebra, A-R.com. Or I've actually created kind of a landing page that has links to all the social media, all the podcasts you can check out. It's just myurls.co/Brad Blazar. So myurls.co/Brad Blazar. Watch the podcast, become a follower. You get the free gift, which is our goal planning guide. It'll give you clarity on your goals. And all I can pray for all of the people out there that are part of your following network and part of mine, Jesse, is they just focus on getting to a higher plane in life by instilling what I call those positive habits that you and I both know are so very important. It's been a pleasure.
Sure. Thank you. And if you guys are listening to this, just make sure you check out the show notes. We'll have links to all of Brad's stuff so you can make sure you go on there and get plugged in with him. So thank you again for being on here today. If you guys are looking to connect further with a group of like-minded people, join myself and so many others in the Habit-Based Lifestyle Secrets group on Facebook, where I'll be dropping daily habits to help you live to your full potential. If you want to be one of our next case studies and begin living this habit-based lifestyle, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, comments, requests, or you want to leave us a 5-star review. Feel free to contact me, Jesse at habitbasedlifestyle.com. Until next episode, have a great day.